Hi, my name is Crystal Hanna. I'm here to do a pottery demonstration for the American Indian Resource Center. We're going to show you my inspiration behind the pottery, the steps in doing different styles to make a pot.
Have you ever heard of the Mound Builders? If you're a member of what we call the 5 civilized tribes and a few other tribes that were originally from the southeastern part of the United States, they are believed to be our ancient ancestors. Around AD to about 1200, they were called societies of the Mississippian culture. These ancient peoples built earthen mounds over the centuries. Many of the mounds were burial mounds, but they also built these great mounds where the chiefs and leaders of their tribes lived and ruled. They may have ruled over thousands of villagers. Much like today, everyone had a job. They may have been the warriors of the tribe, the hunters, or the ones who planted foods and gathered wild foods for their families. Many of these ancient mounds are preserved today. We even have one in Oklahoma. It's spiral mounds. There's Cahokia Mounds, and it's in Illinois, and Moundville in Moundville, Alabama. Even though they were hundreds of miles apart, they still managed to stay connected by travelers from village to village. I hope you will read about them. What we call the artisans of the village, they made things like bows and arrows, baskets, stone and copper items, and of course, pottery. We call these people prehistoric Native Americans because there is no written history about these ancient peoples. Archaeologists have learned many things about these prehistoric societies through their pottery and many very exquisite artifacts that they found in the burial mounds. So that is where I come in today. I'm a potter who practices making pottery much like these ancient ancestors made. There are other people like me who want to keep these ancient arts alive so we can continue to teach our young people and even elders alike so that these ancient art forms will never be lost. Now the question comes to mind, how did I learn to gather clay, process, hand build, design, and make the clay go through a chemical change from clay to pottery? Of course, it's by fire. It must be fired. I was so lucky to meet my mentor, Anna Mitchell, who was a treasure and master potter for Cherokee Nation. That was over 20 years ago. And even though Anna has passed, she inspired me to never stop learning and to be proud of my heritage and to pass on and hopefully inspire others. It is my hope that through this short 30-minute video that our elders and youth will be inspired to learn about our ancient ancestors who believed in the 3 worlds. The upper world, like the air we breathe, the middle world, which is of course us, mankind, and womankind of course, and then the lower world. The lower world was full of mysteries then, and it's full of mysteries now. So much like what they believed in the past is still true today. It is still up to mankind to keep the balance. I hope you enjoy the video and become inspired to learn as much as you can. So in today's video, I want to show you where you get the clay, what it looks like, and the tools that are needed to make your pottery vessel. So a lot of the tools that I use today are tools maybe that I bought from a pottery supply house. But many of the tools, I would like you to visualize what the ancient potters used. So they couldn't go to Hobby Lobby, right, to get their pottery tools. And what did they do with the clay when they found it? How did they get it ready to make their pottery pieces with? So I will show you, a couple of different ways that you can process the clay, and then I'm going to show you some of the tools that you can use maybe just like right out of your kitchen versus spending money, on tools that you might want to purchase either online or at a Pottery Supply or Hobby Lobby or someplace like that. So let's just start with the tools right now. This is dried clay that came from my neighbor's pond.
And the types of clay that we'll be using today is just earthenware clay. There are different kinds of clay. The earthenware, which is like a low fire clay. today we're just going to be using earthenware clay.
So once it's ground up, and then you would just choose the fine particles of the clay, and you would add water to it, and then you would get it to a consistency where it would be pliable or plastic, stretchy, and then you would be able to start a pot. I am going to show you one more way that you might be able to clean the clay besides grinding it and putting it in a powder form, and at that point you'd have to rehydrate it and make it usable. So the other way, in today's more simplistic way, you would just actually put clay maybe in a 5-gallon bucket, so same thing, but instead of grinding it, I would just fill the bucket up, maybe about 3/4 of the way with water. And if you can see this, then you would just let it sit for days or weeks, and until you could put it through like a screen or something to sift with. Now today, I would just put it through like a little kitchen sieve. Maybe in the ancient days, they may have used some fiber or even baskets and sifted it through baskets so that you could use it again. So that's the first part, is getting the clay ready. So once I got the clay that was workable, you would think about what tools you would take. You could actually make a pinch pot with no tools at all. But if you wanted to do some forming with it, maybe the ancient people used shell to shape the inside of the pot. The modern tool would be like a real rib tool. So they would do the same function. It could be something out of your kitchen maybe. Now, you could also use just a round stone to shape. So what I'm trying to show you is you don't have to have modern tools to make a piece of pottery that's hand-built. A kitchen tool that I would use would just be like a little paring knife if I needed to cut into the clay, or even use this as, to try to do design work. So maybe the ancient potters used a stick or a sharp stone maybe, or a knife that they had made out of stone, and this I would use, like my paring knife from the kitchen. Or they could have even used some river cane to help shape or polish the piece. When you're talking about other kitchen tools that you might use, would just be just a wooden paddle from your kitchen. So many tools can be made just yourself. This would just be a piece of wood that I found in the garage, and I shaped it so that I could use it to paddle the vessel, to compress the clay, or to help build up the outside of it. Also during this process, I wanted to show you that when you're making the clay, and this is actually an ancient piece of pottery that I don't know how old it is, but as I mentioned before, you need to think about even thickness. So part of that would just be in the process of building the pot, and this is just a handmade tool that has a curve to it, so that might be like the curve of your vessel that you're working on from the inside. You could use, this is actually Osage orange wood that a fellow potter made for me, that if you have the neck of a vessel and you want to clean it out, or on the pipe part of the vessel, you can smooth out where your hands can't reach anymore. One of my favorite tools is actually a tool, it's a handmade tool, but the design was carved into a wooden paddle so that when you made the vessel itself, you could actually, instead of drawing the
the design in with a stick, you would actually paddle stamp the design onto the pot. And I will show you at least one vessel that's pottery stamped. Here's just a little tool from the Pottery Supply House. It's a little flexible metal tool that's serrated on one side. So this would also be helped in the smoothing process. Here's a couple of more examples of, these are actually ancient designs that were recreated, from by an archaeologist from potsherds that he actually found on these ancient vessels. So again, I could use like the back side of this one to paddle the pot, or if I just wanted to use that for the design, then I would paddle. Another tool that the ancients used, and I still use it also, is a dried corn cob. So because corn was a very important part of their culture, not just for food, for a food source, but even they used everything. You know, they might have used the dried corn cobs to build a fire with, to start a fire because it was combustible. Or they even used this as a design to roll across a vessel while it's wet and imprint that design. So there's lots of tools that you can use. So that my point is, you really don't have to buy tools. You can utilize tools that are available to you. You should be able to do a pottery project. You can just use the tools that you have in your kitchen. So now that we've prepared the clay, and we know that it's good to make pottery with, the first thing I just want to show you is something that's really simple and it's quick. And it's just like a little, I call them a little mascot, where you would just take a small ball of clay, maybe about the size of a large walnut, and then you would take that clay and you would compress it in your hand, really compress it and rub it in your palms of your hands until it's like a round ball. It doesn't have to be perfect, but we're going to make a little mask. So I call them mascots. So now you have the clay, and you would need maybe just a little bit of water on your fingers, not much. And then, because your hand is already cupped, you're going to form that little mask shape right in the palm of your hand. And see how I'm just thinning, shaping. And what you want to be aware of is like consistent wall thickness. Not too thin, not too thick, just right. They say not any thicker than the width of your thumb. So everybody's thumb is a little bit different. So obviously it doesn't have to be precise. So now I've got this little cupped piece here, and you'll get some little stress cracks in the clay, and you can just simply just rub those out with your finger. Now, because adults and kids, they really love to make these, but the history behind these is they were probably made out of shell or stone, and they may have been worn as amulets. So I liked, obviously, to make mine out of clay, and if you did decide to make these, sometimes they can be strung, or they could, to wear, string them with leather or yarn, whatever you happen to have. But you would always want to make a little suspension hole in the top. Not too close to the edge, but far enough down. And then you're going to want to widen that hole out, because what happens when the clay starts drying, it shrinks. So you're going to have a little piece come out the back, and you're just going to want to smooth that, because once that hardens and it gets fired, then you're going to remove those sharp edges that would break off anyway, or even cut you possibly. So now this is like really, really soft clay. So just shape. It doesn't have to be like oblong, but since we're kind of making a mask-like piece, and then you can draw in the clay, like just something simple, like for the eyes, maybe. You can even like pinch up the nose a little bit.
And once you put your designs in it, and I'm going to go to one that I've already done the designs with just to save some time. So here remember I did the suspension hole, and then I did like some what would be considered like tattoo design work. Now, once the clay is hardened, this one is leather hard, so just before that, where this one's kind of stiff, the thing that I would like for you to be aware of, not only just on small pieces, but on the larger vessels as well, those ancient potters, they didn't have glazes. So how would they make a pot that was more waterproof if it didn't have a glaze? So what they did is they would take a river stone, and once that clay becomes what I call leather hard, so if I move this around a lot, it would actually break it. So it's still clay, but what they did is they polished, and it's called burnishing. So burnishing is simply flattening those clay particles. Clay, whenever it's like this, the clay particles, those tiny little clay particles, they like stick up. So once it's hardened a little bit, you can take the stone and you can actually, well, this is just like a river stone, just polish, 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 and it flattens those clay particles. It would actually, if you were making like a large vessel that would maybe hold water for at least a little while, it would make that piece less porous. So that's just a simple little trick that I'd like to show everybody about burnishing. And burnishing, again, is just to make it kind of shiny, but it actually, in a functional piece of pottery, it would make it less porous. So that is our little mask. So what would the next step be? Maybe a little bit bigger piece of clay, the size of small orange, I guess, or a small apple. So the same thing. Roll that clay around in your hands, but this time we're going to do like a little pinch pot. A pinch pot is basically the same way as we started out the little mask at, but you're going to need, again, a little bit of water. What you're going to do is you're going to open that up right in the center. Don't go all the way through, but you can really tell, you know, how far you're able to open that up. So now I just have like my thumb in here. And you're going to use your hand like a little turntable. And you're just going to keep turning, turning, turning. Again, even thickness is like really important. This clay is a little stiff, but I'd rather have it a little stiff than too soft, because that way you can really manage the clay and work it. So again, I'm just turning, turning. Just no tools. I don't really need any tools at this point. And I've really left the top, you know, as thick as the bottom. So it's not too thin here. And you can just keep working the clay until you get like a desired shape. Now at this point, if you wanted to compress the clay a little bit, you can just take your simple little tools from your kitchen. Doesn't have to be a bot tool. So just a wooden paddle and just compress the clay even more. And you can open it up as much as you like then. This is where you control the shape of the clay. Now, what we're really learning today in this video is technique. So we've got the little mask, the little pinch pot where you've just pinched it around and formed it in your hand. not having to use very many tools. But say I wanted to make a larger vessel. Well, I already kind of had the start of one, so I could just open that up a little bit more. See, I'm just manipulating the clay in my hands, and I can tell where I've got maybe a little thickness here, and then I can just maneuver that clay to a different area of the vessel. Again, not very many tools, just using my hands, which is the great thing about pottery. It doesn't take a lot of tools. So now I have like a little open pinch pot. So how would I make this vessel grow? Well, that's the next technique that I want you to learn about today, and that is coiling. So you would take a piece of clay in your hand, again, just kind of roll it around in your hand, but this time we're actually going to make like a snake. So just gonna roll it, roll it, roll it in your hand. And you could actually make a very large vessel this way, but in today's example, it's just going to be enough to go around one time. So I couldn't quite get it in my hand, so this is where you would make your coil grow a little bit. And when I do my coiled vessels, I usually just make enough to go one time around. So again, maybe a little bit of water. And then in this particular case, I'm just going to attach it to the inside. So as I go along, I'm just kind of pinching it down. And then when I get to where it will meet, I make sure that it attaches very securely. So now, because I want it to look just like one piece of clay, I'm just going to bring some of that thickness down. And see here, I do have like a little thin area. It's okay. At this point, you can take a little bit more clay and add it there, because remember, it's all about even thickness. So I had a little thin spot, and I just took a little pinch of clay and added it there. And you can use, kitchen tools at this point. But you don't really need them. So now I've attached that to the outside. But look, I still have to do the inside part. So I'm going to take that just in my hand and support it from the outside, pull the clay down on the inside. Still maintaining that even thickness. Now at this point, you can take a wooden paddle or a spoon, support from the inside, and then continue shaping from the outside. And you can feel on the inside with your hand how it's thinning out the clay. So I started a little bit thicker so that when I did get to this point, I would be able to thin it down a little bit. So still just kind of maneuvering, with my fingers, cleaning out the inside, making it nice and smooth. and I could add another coil. Okay, now you can see I've been able to make the pot grow. I've added a couple more coils, and I've done the smoothing and a little bit of paddling with the kitchen spatula, the wooden spatula, just compressing, getting rid of those coil lines. But now I can't really reach in the inside of my pot really good. So this is where, like the ancients, they probably just used a stone, maybe with a little bit of water in it. And this would like let you attach the coils to the inside and also alter the shape a little bit. So instead of more of a cylinder shape, now I'm going to be able to have more of a bowl shape just by using this stone on the inside of the pot. And I have people say, oh, I could never do pottery, but honestly, it's a pretty simple process, just some simple things to remember. Don't use too much water, even thickness, and really kind of keep that clay compressed with either paddling or tools that you could use out of your kitchen. You can see now that I've added just a paper plate. It's just the dollar store paper plate, non-coated. The thing with the non-coated paper plate is the clay doesn't stick to it. If it was one of those shiny ones, it would be sticking to it and I wouldn't be able to use. This is like my little turntable. Another thing that you can use just right out of your kitchen is just a little simple little paring knife. So I can just go on the outside of it and really smooth and compress. Get all those little lines out. Go all the way around the pot. Now I'm just going to finish off the top of my pot. I'm just using my fingers here to go over the rim of the pot. See, I can use this as my turntable here. Now this pot still is a little bit wet, but just so you can see some of the next steps that you could do to decorate, you could take just like a wooden skewer that, you know, that we use for barbecuing, and you could draw your lines in it. So just simple little lines in the wet clay. So remember, when you make a vessel or a piece of pottery, this is your creation. This is your time to think about your creativity and how to make it your own piece. Now that is one way. Like here I have just like a little simple shell design or a shell, and then this would be just pressing that into your clay. So just a couple of different techniques. I'm not sure if you can see that really great. Now what I do know that the Cherokees did for hundreds of years is they actually used carved designs on a wooden paddle. And so I think the reason this was done is so that you just really wouldn't have to just keep creating designs by hand. You could just really put texture. And the reason they did this was just to make it look nice, but also to make it more functional, because instead of having like a really slick pot with a paddle stamped pot, it would give it some texture and something to hold on to, say if it was a cooking vessel. So there is a little bit of technique to stamping. If you should try this with something that you have at home, and that's why they call it paddle stamping. So it's paddle and anvil. Your paddle in here, and then your support anvil on the inside of the pot. And you're going to strike it. A little too much water maybe. strike. And while this was a technique that was used by the Cherokee and other Southeastern potters, it is a very effective way to put a really pretty design, plus give it some functionality because it would create texture on the pot.
I want to thank the viewers for looking at this video, and I hope that you've learned something, but I want to give a special thanks to Teresa Reynolds, to the American Indian Resource Center, and all of their sponsors for making this possible. Thanks very much.
I have a pottery tip for new potters. One of the most important things when you're building a vessel is even thickness. If you are building a pot and you have like a really thin piece of the clay while you're building it and another thicker piece, the thin part is going to dry more quickly. During the firing, the crack didn't appear till then. So again, it's important to remember about the even thickness also applies to the firing process as well.